he could make him a boogeyman, but he's got a little bit of work to do. Mamdani's favorable, unfavorable ratings are very important work in what me and Matthew do. It's actually quite high. It seems that he hasn't been hit as hard by the Republicans yet, but he starts at a very high cadence. And I think, to be very frank, politics is a beauty contest.
I'd say it's a really dark day for New York City and that they're going to regret electing a communist as their mayor. However, it is a wonderful day for Republican Party fundraisers.
All right, let's introduce our guest. Joining me on Global Pulse tonight is Christopher Hale. He is a Democratic political operative joining us from Tennessee in the United States. Also with us is Matthew Vadum. He's a senior journalist and author. He joins us tonight from Washington, D.C. Gentlemen, welcome to Global Pulse. Christopher Hale, let me begin with you. What a moment this is for Zohran Mamdani, for the Indian American community, for the Democratic Party, and indeed for American politics. Is this an inflection point, you think, for America and for the Democratic Party? Some parallels have already been drawn with Barack Obama. Despite all odds, Zohran Mamdani has silenced his critics and emerged victorious in this historic election. What would you attribute it to?
Oh yeah, I think the big difference between Barack Obama and Zohran Mamdani is when Barack Obama was elected to the United States Senate in 2004, took power in 2005, he was one of 100 United States senators. He was not an executive. He did not lead a city. So I think, as I mentioned last week, the story is still yet to be written. Mr. Mamdani said last night the famous quip that you campaign in poetry, but you govern in prose. But he said, made a prose rhyme, and so I think that suggests that he wants to hold on to the vision that got him elected mayor of New York. But he understands the distinctions between campaigning and governing, and he's going to hit some roadblocks. There is the friction of government that exists. New York is a big, messy, diverse city. Over 100 languages are spoken, many different factions, from labor to capital, to real estate, to teachers unions and the rest. And so I think what will determine whether or not this is an inflection point is how he does as mayor of New York City. I think the most important thing that he said in this campaign is he's keeping Jessica Tisch. Your viewers probably don't know who Jessica Tisch is. She's a lifelong bureaucrat who is now the director of the New York Police Department, NYPD. And she is someone who's very well respected. He needs good people around him like Jessica Tisch. He needs to govern well. President Trump is going to try to make every murder, every act of violence in New York the fault of Zohran Mamdani. And so he needs to be above reproach, and he needs to govern effectively. I have confidence he can do it if he surrounds himself with the right people. And one final note, I don't think there's just one way forward for the Democratic Party. There's 1,000 ways forwards, and this party shouldn't just be one thing; it should be many things. We have Mickey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger, who won last night as moderates. We had folks who won in the rural South and the public service commissioners. It was a great night for the party, from the left to the right. Why is that? Because we can be at our best. We're a big tent party that welcomes everyone, including Mr. Mamdani. So I have high hopes, but he needs to govern effectively.
All right, let me take this to Matthew Vadum. It's very interesting. Donald Trump has just issued a statement on the lines of his social media post earlier, saying that it is the government shutdown which is to blame for the defeat of the Republicans in these elections. Is Donald Trump in denial? Matthew Vadum, there are many who are saying today that the historic win of Zohran Mamdani, as well as the sweeping wins by Democratic candidates in the gubernatorial races that we saw on the same day in the United States, are a referendum on Trump and his MAGA movement and their brand of, politics of exclusion, hatred, bigotry, and racism. That's what many people are saying today. How would you respond?
I'd say it's a really dark day for New York City and that they're going to regret electing a communist as their mayor. However, it is a wonderful day for Republican Party fundraisers because now every piece of direct mail solicitation, every letter that goes out is going to talk about Zohran Mamdani and the threat that he poses to America. Now, with respect to the claim that the shutdown affected New York City, affected voter turnout in New York City, yes, it may have. I suspect it had a greater impact on Virginia, which has a lot more federal employees living in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. New York was never going to vote for the Republican nominee, Curtis Sliwa, and President Trump himself recognized that Curtis Sliwa, the official Republican candidate for the mayoralty of New York, had no chance and urged people to endorse Andrew Cuomo, the independent, who was a Democrat, and former governor of New York, and whom President Trump hates because he wanted to save. This is a futile attempt to prevent Zohran Mamdani from being elected. So, yeah, I think the shutdown has had an impact on elections. I'm not sure that it had that much of an election on New York City, where President Trump is already, widely despised, and there's only a handful of Republicans. So it wouldn't. It really, I don't really think it would have mattered because to people in New York City, President Trump is the villain. To people outside of New York City, Zohran Mamdani is their newly appointed villain, and he is going to be attacked relentlessly by President Trump and Republicans for the entire time that he's in office. So you better buckle up and get used to it.
Buckle up and get used to it. I'm pretty sure that Zohran Mamdani knows what he's in for. But Christopher, coming here, you heard Matthew Vadum, clearly not a fan of Zohran Mamdani. He says a dark day for New York, but a great day for Republican fundraisers. Is Zohran Mamdani going to be a bogeyman now for the Republicans and Trump and the MAGA movement going into the midterms next year? And also many have expressed the fear that we could see New York City, the financial capital of the world, now on a collision course with Donald Trump. He's already threatened to cut off federal funding to the city in the event of a Mamdani win. He's even suggested that he could consider sending in federal troops.
I think he could make him a boogeyman, but he's got a little bit of work to do. Mamdani's favorable, unfavorable ratings are very important work in what me and Matthew do. It's actually quite high. It seems that he hasn't been hit as hard by the Republicans yet, but he starts at a very high cadence. And I think, to be very frank, politics is a beauty contest. And President Trump, who's famously obsessed with TV production, he oftentimes talks about some Democrats actually being good at central casting. He thinks that Gavin Newsom looks good on TV. Zohran Mamdani looks good on TV. He does not look like the communist threat that my Republican friends wants to make him out to be. Now, they can chip away at that, but they got a lot of work to do. And I think that President Trump needs to play this game carefully. If he valorizes Zohran Mamdani and Zohran Mamdani actually, his favorabilities go up, he's got a big problem. And I think that I hope the American people understand that what's right for New York is not right from Nashville or not right from DC, that there's a thousand different ways of proceeding. Now, that's, like I said earlier, though, I think that the risk with Mr. Mamdani, because he is such a unique brand, he is a democratic socialist mayor of the biggest city, one of the biggest cities in the world, biggest city of the country, everything will be tied to him. And so I think that he, once again, has to govern effectively. But if I'm President Trump, I proceed carefully. I don't think that I necessarily lift this guy up without the knowledge that you actually can defeat him. If you're confident that you can defeat him in media, if you're confident you can defeat him in terms of favorabilities, go after him. But otherwise, marginalize him and don't ignore him. So I think President Trump's going to have to play his hand carefully, especially with the midterms coming up. Look, last night was a thumping for the Republican Party, 15 points in Virginia. That's a 20-point swing from 2021. 14 points in New Jersey. That's a 13-point swing from 2021. But most importantly, we won seats in the rural South in Georgia. The Republican Party had an awful night. So I think that they need to figure out how to proceed going forward and be careful on the battles that they take.
Okay, Matthew Vadum, come in here. Whatever your opinion may be of Zohran Mamdani and what he represents and what it might mean for the city of New York, would you not have to at least partially agree with those who are saying today that these election results were effectively a referendum on Donald Trump and his brand of politics? That Americans have spoken out a year after they re-elected Donald Trump and, in a sense, rejected his politics of hate, bigotry and exclusion. And this isn't just Zohran Mamdani that we're talking about, because the Democrats have swept the elections. They've won the governor races in Virginia and New Jersey. We're talking today about how 3 Indian Americans, all of them Muslim, have won their respective elections, including the mayor of Cincinnati, who's been re-elected, and the lieutenant governor of Virginia. The question really is, Donald Trump can hate on Mamdani all he wants, but shouldn't this be a wake-up call for him and the Republicans ahead of the midterms?
One should never be dismissive of election results. I think that that New York City is not representative of the United States as a whole, and sure, in New York City it was a referendum on President Trump, but it's a referendum that President Trump was always going to lose. As well, in the 2 states, in New Jersey more than Virginia. Virginia is a bluish Democratic-leaning state. New Jersey is a solid blue Democrat state. So there was never really any doubt that Democrats were going to win in New Jersey. The question mark was Virginia, especially where they had an attorney general candidate who urged violent attacks against his opponents and their families. And I'm still shocked that the attorney general candidate, Jay Jones, won despite his open espousal of violence. I keep hearing from sources that people are going to try to disbar him, which would take him out of the office of Attorney General of Virginia. But we have to wait to see what happens. So, yeah, this is a referendum on Republicans and President Trump. But I don't think the results in New York and New Jersey tell us very much, because they don't like President Trump to begin with. The results in Virginia are more representative of the country as a whole, but you have to temper that. You have to factor in that Virginia has a lot of federal government employees who are very pissed off, who are very angry that the federal government is shut down and that they are not getting their paychecks for the time being. And as well, they're also upset that President Trump has made efforts to fire so many federal government employees, especially through DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, that Elon Musk was head of for some time. So it's this hostility to the federal bureaucracy that made a lot of Virginians turn out against the Republican candidates. Okay. So again, the Virginia result is more representative of the country than New Jersey and New York, but it's not a definitive
Christopher
thing.
needs to go, so if I could just go back to Christopher and for a couple of questions. Can we have Christopher back, please? Christopher, I know you need to leave, but I just have another couple of questions for you before we let you go. The point that Matthew is making is that New York is not necessarily America. While this may have been a referendum on Donald Trump, but too early to really talk about what may happen in the midterms. But let me ask you a more direct question, Christopher, a question that is being asked by all Mamdani critics. That, he's won a famous win, but could the road ahead be a very bumpy one. Not only because Donald Trump is threatening to be very hostile to New York, but because there are many who say that Zohran Mamdani's socialist ideas are simply too impractical for a city like New York. Many say, he will end up bankrupting the financial capital. And that, it is one thing to make big election promises, quite another thing to actually deliver on them. How would you respond?
I think you're absolutely right. I think that you have a major issue with how he approaches President Trump. And he needs to proceed carefully. I actually think that last night I would encourage him to actually take a slightly different approach. I think that he was pretty aggressive in that speech. And I think the next few weeks should really be about reconciliation. He needs to bring the entire city together. He needs to bring the entire party together. And I think he actually needs to get out for the good foot with President Trump. So that's what I would encourage him to do.
Okay, so final question, Christopher, before we let you go. What would, you say to the naysayers who say that the man has promised New York the moon and he will fail spectacularly, fall flat on his feet because he simply cannot deliver, and that he may then emerge as a poster boy for the Republicans?
Yes, I think that I would really encourage him. He said last night that and you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose. He needs to govern in prose. So I hope he rolls back some of those promises and really focuses on affordability. That's what got him elected, and that's what he should focus on as mayor.
All right. Okay, Christopher, we'll let you go. Thank you so much for joining us. Matthew, let me come back to you at this point. Looking at the big picture, like I said earlier, are you surprised by the overall results of these elections? I take your point that New York is a deep blue city and the Democrats will need a lot more to be able to replicate such a win on a national scale. But the fact that, there are many who seem to be rather angry with Donald Trump today. Polls seem to suggest that his popularity has hit new lows. There is anger, as you said, over the government shutdown and, the layoffs that are happening and the fact that people are not getting their paychecks. Many also believe that, the politics of bigotry and white supremacy and Christian nationalism is now being rejected by a very large number of Americans. Like I mentioned earlier, 3 Indian Americans, all of whom are Muslim, have won today. What message do you think needs to go out to Donald Trump and the Republicans ahead of the midterms of 2026?
Well, I don't think the Muslim candidate won for mayor of Minneapolis, but yeah, sure, some did win. You're saying what should Trump's message be? I'm not
What is the
really.
voters' message? What is the voters' message for Trump and the Republicans?
What is the voters' message to Trump? It's that he needs to concentrate on the economy and making things affordable for people again. And it's not his fault that the inflation is. It's mostly not his fault that inflation is out of control and that people are having difficulty affording groceries and so on. But as president, you take ownership of these things after you've been in office, and he's been in office for almost 10 months now, and he has to accept responsibility for the problem, and people are expecting great things from him. He brought prices of some household goods have come down, eggs, gasoline, and so on, things like that. Those prices have come down, but people still are feeling the sting of inflation, and people are upset about rising prices. And I'm not sure what President Trump can do about that. But if he doesn't do
But didn't he?
something
Sorry to
about it,
interrupt, Matthew. But
yeah.
you're saying you're not sure what Donald Trump can do about it. But we all remember one of his most prominent election promises was that he was going to, bring down the cost of living in the United States. He kept blaming the Biden administration for the cost of living crisis in the country. Nearly 1 year into office, do you really believe Donald Trump can hide behind the excuse that he can not do anything to contain the cost of living crisis? And also, if he thinks that by tariffing the entire world, including India, he's bringing in lots of money into the American coffers and making life easier for Americans, he's wrong, because at the end of the day, it is the consumers in America who will end up paying through their nose for these more expensive products thanks to Donald Trump's tariff. I've had guests on my show who are saying that his biggest sin has been to neglect the economy.
President Trump has not said, I don't think he said he can't do anything. It was my quip to you that he may not be able to actually do anything about it. That was not his position, but there are things that he thinks that he can do, and he's going to try to do them. I don't think he's going to hide behind that. I think that tariffs, which are going before the Supreme Court in the next few minutes, the Supreme Court is going to rule in the two cases, the two lawsuits brought against the tariffs, and those tariffs were blocked by lower courts, but those rulings are on hold for the time being. I think it is more likely than not that the Supreme Court is going to strike down the tariffs, or is going to strike down at least some of them. They might pull a cutesy move and do something like he can keep some of the tariffs, but he can't keep some of the other tariffs, or maybe the federal government gets to keep the tariff money that it's collected already. But I think that the tariffs I don't think that the tariffs have, for the most part, a future. And I think that tariffs are a problem, and he is going to pay for that eventually, politically, and and I don't really understand his argument for tariffs, because the fact, just because I don't understand the argument of that, of a trade of a deficit, that the fact that one country buys more from another country than that country buys from the first country. I don't think that's really a deficit, but this is the way he and Peter Navarro, his chief advisor on trade, view these things. So, if they could if the tariffs could be reduced or eliminated, I think that would be good for the economy. I don't know if it is going to happen. I have a feeling that the Supreme Court is going to strike them down, or at least rein them in somehow. But I don't have a crystal ball. I can't see into the future. I don't know what they're going to do. But if they follow the law clearly, instead of making a political compromise, I don't see how they couldn't strike them down.
Okay, tariffs apart, and clearly it's a very flawed argument that's been made by Trump and his administration, but Trump doesn't really listen to anybody, including economists, I'm guessing. But coming back to New York, Matthew, there are many who are saying that Trump, being Trump, is likely to double down on his political fight against Zohran Mamdani. Could New York end up facing the brunt of it? Could we, for instance, see Donald Trump carrying out his threats of cutting off federal funds to New York and maybe even sending in the National Guard?
He could cut off federal funds to New York, but I think he would have to have at least some kind of justification for doing that. Like if New York is not following a federal law, like, for example, the federal government made a ruling that the congestion pricing scheme that you get during rush hour, you have to pay extra number of dollars to drive into Manhattan. Federal Department of Transportation said you can't have that. And I think that New York City was dragging its heels. If New York City were to continue to resist that ruling, then maybe there would be a reason to cut off some of its transportation funds. You're getting into a very complicated area. Now, with respect to sending troops, presumably that would be National Guard troops taking over the New York National Guard, or sending National Guard troops from other states into New York. I believe that this would not happen unless there were resistance by New York. Like, for example, if New York were to blockade immigration and customs enforcement offices, or if it were to actively interfere with immigration officials arresting illegal aliens. I think if there were that kind of a justification, and there were widespread violence against ICE officials, such as you've seen in Chicago, Illinois, and the suburbs there, and in Portland, Oregon, then yeah, you could see troops there. I don't think he would send troops to New York City just because he doesn't like the new mayor.
Okay, hold that thought, Matthew. We want to play out for our viewers the first on-camera reaction that has come in from Donald Trump to Zohran Mamdani's win. Let's listen in.
If you read the pollsters, the shutdown was a big factor, negative for the Republicans, and that was a big factor. And they say that I wasn't on the ballot was the biggest factor, but I don't know about that, but I was honored that they said that. And I just want to thank everybody for being here, and a very special thanks to Vice President J.D. Vance, who's doing a terrific job. J.D., thank you.
Okay, Matthew, Donald Trump there blaming the government shutdown for the defeat of the Republicans in this election. Let me ask you, looking at the big picture, going beyond just New York, if you were Donald Trump, would you be concerned that, the people of America might be angry with this administration and they might want to teach them a lesson in the midterms of 2026?
I think that one should always view election results with humility, and certainly these results were not positive for Trump and the Republicans. But as I said earlier, I don't think the results in New York City and New Jersey portend catastrophe for the Republican Party. The result from Virginia is of greater concern because Republicans are not strong in Virginia, but it's not a solid blue Democrat state like New Jersey or New York. And they had a chance there and they blew it. And, people are saying they had a weak candidate. I don't have an opinion on whether the governor's candidate, Winsome Earl Sears, was weak or not. I don't know. I didn't really pay attention to her very closely, but the fact that the Republicans could not win the three main offices, lieutenant governor, governor, and attorney general in Virginia, is a matter of concern for Republicans. And it was a verdict on Trump, but again, it's largely because of so many federal government employees being in Virginia and being upset with Trump dismantling the federal government and the continuing government shutdown. But yeah, it's not good for the Republicans, the result in Virginia, and they definitely need to take it into account moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay, final question, Matthew, before we let you go. How do you respond to those Mamdani admirers who are saying today that, this is an inflection point in American politics? This is another Barack Obama moment for the Democratic Party and for the US. I know that Mamdani cannot run for president since he wasn't born in the United States. But the parallels being drawn with Barack Obama, how do you look at that?
I view that as a triumphalist euphoria. I think that they won, and the endorphins have gone to their head, and they're starting to hallucinate, and they're starting to have delusions. I don't think Zohran Mamdani is Barack Obama. Barack Obama's election was definitely an inflection point, but Barack Obama cleverly concealed his radicalism. Zohran Mamdani beats his chest about it. And that will not play, as that American expression goes, that will not play in Peoria. And that does not, I don't think, the verdict is not in yet on what the rest of America thinks of Zohran Mamdani, but I think they're going to be skeptical at best. So, I don't think he's the second coming of Barack Obama, although his supporters right now are convincing themselves that he is indeed that.
Okay, you clearly disagree, not a Mamdani fan. That is abundantly clear. But I can
Right.
tell you, love the man or hate the man, but Matthew, his win is reverberating today, not just across New York, but I can tell you around the world. And yes,
Oh.
most certainly many in India are celebrating. After all, this is the first New York mayor of Indian origin. And, seeing his Indian family up there on stage with him was a very proud moment for many here in India. And he also celebrated his win, if you noticed, Bollywood style. That clearly has resonated with many here in India. But
I missed
the road
that.
ahead-
Yeah, they did a lot. There
Yes.
was dancing and women with skirts. I missed that, but I'll have to watch that because I like Bollywood.